go around and introduce ourselves, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a room monitor the last 2 days, and each time as I sit through presentations, I think, boy, I would really like to know people. So I'm Rock Fremont, and I'm the pastor at Shepherd of the Hills United Church of Christ. And I'm here today to just share a little bit more about the UCC with you all. So if we could just go around and introduce ourselves, and then maybe what tradition we're coming from, if we're comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you want to call on somebody, or Carolyn?
Carolyn Sugiyama Clausen. I grew up in Hawaii. So I grew up as a Buddhist judo shu person. I didn't get confirmed because I didn't believe enough. And then in my 20s, I hung out with Catholics in Boston.
Oh, wow.
And then I married a Lutheran man who was not practicing either. So there we are.
And thank you, and welcome.
And I've been here for 3 days. This is my 3rd day.
Wonderful.
So I've listened to 8 presentations.
And does Joan and Sandy, are you with us? Joan has no audio or video, but she was brought up Methodist and now practices no organized religion.
Oh.
And Anne, I don't know, does everyone already know you in here?
Oh, maybe not. I'll introduce myself. I'm Ann Taylor. I'm actually on staff with the Arizona Interfaith Movement, but I'm also a representative on the Council for Christian Science. And I attended church in Scottsdale. I've been there a long time, and I'm a 4th generation Christian Scientist. And we have so much in common with my interfaith family. I'm just humbled and grateful to be learning on this journey with you guys.
Thanks, Anne. Larry, before you leave, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Larry. I found the other half of Rock that he lost.
And you identify as American Baptist?
American Baptist, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a clergyman in American Baptist. Yes.
And Sandy, I don't know if, okay. Lucia?
Yes, hi, I'm.
Hello.
Oh, there's Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
Oh, hi. Yeah, so my background is Hinduism.
Wonderful.
So I'm very curious to learn about other religions, and, so thought I'd attend this presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Lucia Anderson. I was raised in a Quaker home, and I'm now a member of the Unification Church, AKA Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, AKA Heavenly Parents Holy Community. That's me.
So that sounds a bit like, I think that's a great segue. Welcome, everybody. It's a great segue into the United Church of Christ, because we're big on acronyms. So sometimes all this gets confusing. So I'm just going to preface a little bit, just acknowledging that although we may not be Protestant or we may not be Christian, in an American context, we tend to live and kind of breathe in Christianity and know about it or know something of it. You can't help it, honestly. So just to acknowledge that and assume that everyone's coming with some knowledge of what Christianity is about. So before, just be kind of stewing on some questions that you might be curious about in terms of the United Church of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take those questions after this just brief intro. So the brief intro is, the United Church of Christ is what we've all heard of Methodist, we've all heard of Presbyterians and Lutherans. These are subsets or subcategories of what we would call Protestantism in the United States. So Presbyterians, Lutherans, they're all part of the Protestant tradition. The United Church of Christ is what we would call our subcategory, if you will, would be a united and uniting church. There are united and uniting churches throughout the world. Some that we may have heard of would be the United Church of Canada, which is made up of 3 different denominations that merged together. The United and Uniting Church of Australia would be another example, which again is made up of, I think, at least 3 churches that merged together. And in India, there are 2 churches that were made up of 5 or more denominations that came together. In the United States, we're known as the United Church of Christ. Not to be confused with the Church of Christ, which many people do here in the Southwest because they're so much larger. So the United Church of Christ were made up of 2 different denominations that came together, and both of those denominations were mergers prior to merging with each other. So in the 1930s, you had the Congregational Church, which many people have heard of, probably coming from Hawaii. You see lots of congregational churches around. So those congregational churches merged with a smaller group called the Christians, and to form the Congregational Christian Church. And that was in the 1930s. Now, there were 2 small denominations. They were made up of German immigrants. One was the Evangelical Church, and the other was the German Reformed Church. Both of those churches joined in the 30s to form the Evangelical and Reformed Church. Then in 1957, all of those churches merged together to form the United Church of Christ. And so these the subgroup, the subcategory that I mentioned, the United and Uniting Church bodies, the whole vision of these bodies is to model Jesus's prayer that we may all be one, from John's Gospel in the Christian Bible, John 17:21, where Jesus prays on the night before he was betrayed that all of his followers might be one. So the real theme or focus of these United and Uniting church bodies is to model unity in our world. It is also worth noting that we are a progressive church body. We were the first denomination to ordain women into Christian ministry back in 1842, I believe. The first woman ordained, her name was Antoinette Brown. We also ordained the first openly gay man into ministry. And today we're fully inclusive of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, siblings. And I think that's all I want to do in terms of a brief introduction. Maybe that stimulated others to ask questions, stuff that you actually want to know about instead of giving you. I want to make this good for you. Any questions? I know, Joan, if you have a question, you can type it in. I'll see it. Carolyn, yeah.
Growing up Buddhist, I didn't know a lot about Christianity. And to me, in my community, there were so many different Protestant churches.
Yeah.
Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, as you said, Congregational, where my parents were married. And it's very confusing for young people and even adults. Like, why go to these people as opposed to these people? So maybe that's too much to ask you, but how do you choose?
Sure. Well, I think it's a great question. It's a great noticing, if you will. I will say that there's some convergence today, and the convergence today would be around what we call ecumenism, which comes from a Greek word that just means known world. And often Christians use this word ecumenical or ecumenism to talk about relationships with other Christians. And so there is some ecumenical consensus today in terms of journeying together, getting over our differences, and modeling this prayer of Jesus. So for instance, there was a movement in the 1980s called the Consultation on Church Union. And that Consultation on Church Union would have merged 8 or maybe 9, I'm forgetting, I think 9 different Protestant church bodies into one church body that would have been a united church for the United States. Now, ultimately, we didn't do that. Those churches did not do that. That would have encompassed Episcopalians, the Disciples of Christ, the United Church of Christ, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church Zion, the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, the Moravians, all of these different Protestant church bodies that would have brought us into one family. Well, what they decided to do instead was do what we call full communion agreements. So we recognize each other as being, I mean, I hate this word, but we recognize each other as being all part of the one body of Christ and legitimate speakers of church. It sounds awful, but that's kind of what it's about. And so I, as a minister in the United Church of Christ, I can actually serve in a Lutheran church as their pastor. I can serve in a Presbyterian church as their pastor. I can serve in a Disciples of Christ as their pastor. So we have these agreements now that break down these old historic barriers. And honestly, a lot of people that are sitting in our pew don't even know what divided us in the beginning. And most of those dividing issues are, generations ago. We're talking 1500s for most of them. So, and yes, Sandy, I'm talking about the United Church of Christ, and I'm currently serving at the United Church of Christ in here in Phoenix. We're on the Scottsdale. So Joan asked if there's a UCC church in Scottsdale. Answer is yes. We have 2 churches in Scottsdale. One is up on Shea. I think it's Congregational Church of the Valley. We have another one, Scottsdale Congregational Church, which is kind of South Scottsdale. And then my church is in Arcadia, which is Scottsdale, Phoenix border, 64th Street and Lafayette, which is between Indian School and Camelback.
So can I just build on that? So it sounds like from what you just said that some of the churches have kept their original name, like the congregational churches.
Yes.
But the denomination or the umbrella has changed.
Yeah, so for instance, when I came to my church, they were still flying the banner of Congregational Church because we believe in autonomy at the local level. So it's really left up to a local congregation to make their own decisions on a lot of things. So when I came, I said, you know what, there is no Congregational Church anymore. Now we're the United Church of Christ. That happened in 1957. So we kind of intentionally dropped the name Congregational from our name. But I will say that often, because there's so many churches of Christ in the Southwest, which is very, tends to be pretty conservative. You know, they don't ordain women. They don't have LGBTQ inclusion. They're non-instrumental, so they sing, but they have no musical instruments in their worship. So people see United Church of Christ, and they often think we are the Church of Christ. So, often a lot of our churches still wave the flag of congregationalism because some people at least remember what that name was about.
Right.
And we founded Harvard School. That's probably another feather in our cap or something that people are interested in. Founded Harvard College as a college to, we believe in educated clergy. So that was founded to educate congregational clergy at the time. And then ultimately founded another divinity school called Andover Newton Divinity School, also in Massachusetts. And that was the first school to offer graduate level education in the United States.
Hmm.
So Church of First, we're very proud of our of inclusion of all people.
So
Yes.
weren't the Puritans who came to James or to Plymouth Rock, weren't they Congregationalists?
Yeah, so we're often known as the Church of the Pilgrims.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, again, that was one of our predecessor bodies. Any other questions? Again, I wanted to make this as relevant as possible. Here we are at the 20-minute piece.
Joan would like the address of your church. Or the churches. I'm not sure if you meant all three of them, or you mean all
So,
the ones in Scottsdale, Joan, or the one where Rock preaches?
so that is our denominational church website. And that is my church's website. And I don't know the address for the other two churches in Scottsdale, but you can find them on that main ucc.org. You can do a search, but my church's address is there on Lafayette.
Hmm.
And I'm not in this to have anyone come to my church, but literally, I mean, it's always good to have visitors.
Mhm.
And actually, as I mentioned to Larry in our opening session, we have been worshiping virtually for the last year, 53 weeks of virtual services. And this last Sunday, Easter, was our first time back together. You know, we were all in mask, we were socially distant, we were not singing, you know, we were being safe. And so for as weird as it was just so good to be together again and actually see people's eyes. And for me, it was so nice to get to preach to people
Right.
instead of to a screen.
Right. Do you have
Carolyn, so was it the, what is it, Buddhist churches in America that you were connected with? Judo Shinshu?
It's Jodo Shu Buddhism.
Okay.
But like Christianity, there are many different Buddhist religions now,
Yeah.
churches.
Yeah.
So they've splintered off and they have different practices, they believe in different saints. So I asked the same question at one event because I said, who are we supposed to believe in? And they said, Buddha. They went right back to Buddha and they said, that doesn't matter what Buddhism you're, practicing. Listen to what Lord Buddha had to say. So then I went, okay, that made sense then.
And Carolyn, you commented Tucson. Yes,
Yeah.
there are.
Yeah, just several.
I think we have three, I think we have three churches in Tucson.
Yeah, I've been to a few of them.
So we have our regional level connects Arizona, New Mexico, and El Paso, and we have about 50 churches in total spread across that geographic area. So we're pretty small these days.
One more minute.
Okay, and I'm gonna just pause my recording now. So we have just under 1 million members now in the United States. So pretty small in terms of, as you look at other Christian denominations.
Do you have
And I think our Protestants, as far as Protestants go, our Southern Baptist friends are still the largest.
Do you have a Sunday school program?
Do we have a Sunday school program? Well, you know, I was just sharing in our last group that since we've been in lockdown, wanting to model this idea of unity, if you attended the session on Community of Christ, did you attend that session? I think that was the first day. The Community of Christ, I'm good friends with many of them. And so we partnered with them to do a children's book club. And so for basically the last year, we've been partnering together to read children's stories to our kids. And they're all non-religious books that just impart good things and how to be a good person in the world. And that has been amazing in terms of, you know, especially for our kids, to get them together with other kids from another church, another tradition. They've loved it.
Great. That's awesome.